So just while we're waiting, Alex, we've got 3 minutes before we kick off. How's your week been?
My week has been good, thank you, Mike. Yeah, all is good here in Kotal. We've got the hot dry season right now arriving. So some people complain about it, but it's basically blue skies and sunshine.
I don't get that. How can you complain about beautiful weather?
Yeah. It depends where you are. If I'm in Bangkok, it can get too hot. But if I'm here and I can jump in the ocean, every day, then there's not much to complain about.
Very nice. So we've got 246 people who have booked onto this session. Obviously, if anyone's joined already, we're having a bit of small talk, just waiting for people to arrive. And we're going to dive straight into the action and try and give as much value as possible. Obviously, we'll set the scene in a moment with introductions to myself and Alex. But for now, if you have any questions, please pop them onto LinkedIn. My colleague Megan will pick up those questions and feed them through to us. So hopefully we'll be able to answer as many as possible. So we're still a minute or so in before we kick off. I'll tell you what though, Alex, one thing I'm hearing at the moment is the main pain point seems to be business development. So hopefully we've struck a chord with this session because a lot of people are finding it a challenge. So let's try and give as much away as we can today for people to take away and use.
Absolutely. Let us do that. Hold nothing back, as you wrote in the
Absolutely.
event.
So we got 1 minute before we kick off.
Hello, John. John from Kings Lynn tuning in. How you doing, mate? Shout out. Just got a message from my buddy. John and I were watching your DVDs in a basement boardroom in London about 15 years ago. 15?
Oh God, yeah.
17 years ago, maybe. Yeah.
Wow. Do you know, I still get people saying, I've lost session 5 of How to Excel as a Recruiter. Do you still sell them? We discontinued them years ago. So everything's online now and all refreshed. But they did some good work, those DVDs, and
collector's items.
In their day, they had a value. So right, so we're now on the half hour. So let's kick off. So Alex, delighted to have you here. Quite an unusual format, of course, to have 2 million billers in the same, discussion. And as we said in the marketing of this, let's give as much as we can. Let's hold nothing back. So we've got slight differences, I think, in terms of the way that we developed business and the types of business we developed. If anyone's interested in our bios, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. We're not going to go into that, and you'll see it on the marketing for this session, of course. So let's just go straight for it, Alex. And tell me, you build a lot of money. How did you do it? How did you build your desk?
Cool. That's a good question to kick off with, Mike. So I think I worked in recruitment. Now I've been in recruitment for 17 years. I was billing for 12 years. I've been coaching for the last 5. And of course, there's no one easy answer to how did you build a big desk. But I want to avoid repeating sort of generic age-old recruitment mantras, but a lot of the age-old recruitment mantras still hold true today. I think for me, it was a lot of hard graft. So I did not really, I was about 5 years in to my recruitment career before I started to really bill, big. I think it was probably in the 5th year maybe that I billed over 500K, and prior to that it was much less. So I think that underneath everything, some of the fundamental ingredients for my success were, commitment over a long period of time. Yeah, consistency, not without some breakdowns, of course. I was surrounded by some good mentors, which was definitely very, very helpful for me. And I listened to them and I applied, what I learned from them. And then ultimately, if I was to try and sort of summarize in a nutshell what it was that I did to build that desk, and this will probably be a theme, I imagine, throughout the call today, it was having a plan, having a strategy, and executing against it consistently over time, and reflecting, reviewing and evaluating what was working, what wasn't, and then improving it. And over a long period of time. Greg Savage, who you mentioned in one of your posts the other day, he says that the formula for success in recruitment is activity by quality by target audience, and I think that that's true. And as long as you're making sure that you're executing across that effectively, then it's only a matter of time. And that's how I experienced it and how I went about it. That might be a little bit vague. I'm happy to, if anyone wants to ask questions in the chat, and I'm sure we're going to get into it in more detail, but high level, hard graft, long time, reflection and adjustment.
There's some nuggets there. The people want to get rich, and the closest a lot of people get to that is, put your lottery ticket in, or if you're fortunate, inherit wealth off some, a wealthy old auntie that you've never known before in your life, and the other alternative is work your socks off. So absolutely, work ethic is massive. Big billers tend to work harder than little billers, and it's a fact. You put more effort in. So I think for me, I was in my third year probably when I started to feel big, but similar. And I didn't really have mentors in my first two recruitment companies. It was just, get on the phone and do it. So I almost quit the industry, actually. In fact, I did. I was going to leave the industry. And it was only when I finally bumped into a guy called Steve, who's my business partner today, who kind of put me on the right path. Process. He taught me process, the importance of that. He taught me the importance of using your CRM effectively. And I was fastidious about that. I was, if I made a call to someone today and they got rid of me, I might get one snippet of information. I think, a number of people over the years have picked up on my little catchphrase when a client's trying to get rid of you. Thanks, Mike, but we're not really going to go ahead. But thanks very much anyway. Well, actually, John, no problem. But just one more thing before I go, please. And I was able to hold on to a conversation a little bit longer with one question like that. And I would extract some information. So it might be, when you're recruiting, what's the most difficult kind of individual to recruit? And they say, it's an XYZ, look, I've really got to go. And the phone goes down. So that is then in my CRM. And I've got a distribution list from there where I can market that kind of individual to many companies, or I can pick up the phone next time I have one of those, or the next sales call that I make is on point. Because, John, last time we spoke a month ago, you mentioned when you are recruiting, the most difficult kind of person to find is X. As it happens, I've just interviewed an outstanding X, blah, blah, blah. So I was able to then zone in on that. And I think that back to the Greg Savage comment, it's like that's your target audience, isn't it? You're zoning in on that. But for you, Alex, how important was process? Did you live on the CRM? Did you have processes that drove business development?
Yeah, I mean, process. I talked about strategy, having a plan, having a process. I think we're probably talking around similar things there. Very important to me. The point you just made about getting fobbed off in a lot of the calls, but always managing to get something. This is and zoning in over time. This is really paramount to what we're doing. And when I talk about having a big picture strategy and a plan, playing the long game, a BD, a sales consultant, a recruiter who's doing BD might make 1,000, they might have 1,000 BD conversations in a year. It might be more than that, it might be less, but it's a lot of conversations. You're covering a lot of ground. And so 1 year from now, after 1,000 conversations with, with clients, where do you want to be? How are you going to advance your position in your business, in your desk, beyond just 1,000 lucky dips of got any jobs, yes or no, because that is the kind of the default routine and the song and dance that I see even today as a coach with a lot of recruiters. They'll tell you that then that's not what they're doing. They'll say, no, of course, I'm not just calling and saying, have you got any jobs? I'm interested in the long term. I tell them I'm interested in the long term. And, I ask them if there's another decision maker. But the reality is that, certainly for me, as that was your question, certainly for me, a big part of being successful was having really a system for continually zoning in over time, so that as the years went by, I was nurturing an increasingly relevant and warm account base, right? And then it was only a matter of time until some of those doors opened. Not many of them did, but enough of them did in a big enough way that that we were able to build a lot of money there.
Yeah, well,
without that process, you're just wandering blindly, and you can only do that for so long before you get totally dejected and give up. People say trust the process. Well, you need to have a process to trust it, right?
Certainly, yeah. We just had a question coming in about it's Thomas is asking the question. Any tips on building relationships with prospects? So I think for me, my biggest tip on that would be, I don't want to see you in the office. So get out and meet customers, prospect customers. So my strategy, because you were more winning big accounts, Alex, weren't you? And I was slightly more spot business, that I would go out and close a prospect customer. I did win big accounts. Merrill Lynch, for example, spent £2 million a year with me, and I nurtured that account from zero. But I was probably more spot business than you were in big in the environment you worked in. So we can explore that later. So, but build relationships with prospects and go meet them. So the key there is qualify them before you decide to go and visit them. And I've made the mistake of not qualifying. I went down to see a prospect once when I was doing contract recruitment. My first question was, how often do you recruit contractors? And he said, never. And I thought, So I said, under what circumstances might you recruit contractors? Thinking that was a good recovery question. He said, never. It's a sign of a weak manager. I never recruit contractors. I run a tight ship here. So I grew a pair of donkey ears and I pretended to be a perm recruiter for the next 30 minutes and left, So why didn't I qualify in advance? So there's a number of ways you can qualify in advance. I'll share my screen, because I think there's something here that might be useful for everybody, because it also ties into process. So I'm just going to share my entire screen if I can do that. And I'm going to show this tool here. So, this is as old as the hills, but people still don't use it. And it's so powerful. So every single candidate you speak to every single day, if you speak to 10 candidates per day, then you can get, if the candidates had 3 jobs, then you've got 3 bits of targeted sales information covering all these things on the tool that I'm showing you. Now, so that's 3 bits of information from one candidate, which is 30 bits of information in one day, which is 150 bits of information in a week, which is 650 with the calendar month, which is nearly 2,000 bits of information like that. 3 months from today, if you execute on that, and that's even if you're only talking to 10 candidates, that gives you a huge amount of information. So if I'm talking to the candidate and the candidate is, I say, so what size of team would you like to work in, John? No, I'm not too concerned, Mike. Okay, and how many are in your team there? 15, right. And what was the mix between permanent and contract? I'm getting valuable information. So I'm doing some qualification prior to, the next step of getting into a meeting with that prospect candidate. Now, this works for permanent and contract, but particularly for contract, because, LinkedIn doesn't wave at you, John Smith, saying, hello, I recruit contractors, but the candidate used to report to him. So therefore, he recruits contractors. And one obvious route is to pick up the phone, take a reference on that candidate. And there is a skill involved in that that's deeper than just explaining this here. But, that's a sales process that I'm sharing now that is not difficult to do. And look at the grading here. So I used to like referencing, candidates that are not particularly good caliber. I mean, sometimes I was wrong and they're actually better caliber than I thought. Quite often my weak competitor had not referenced them and had placed them with a client and the client was unhappy with them. Why would you not target that customer base? So I think, Thomas, for building relationships, I would focus upon qualify how often the prospect client recruits, find out at the end of a call. Thanks, John. Great to chat with you. Oh, by the way, just before I go, how many staff did you hire in the last 12 months? 15. And how many do you expect to hire in the next 12 months? 7, but you've really got to go. I've got information that's valuable now. Now, it might be I close them for a meeting on that call, or it might be I close them for a meeting on a subsequent call, but at least I know I'm on the right track. So the building relationships is not just, and again, value your input on this, Alex. It's not just about the relationship. It's about closing. So the big thing I see a lot of experienced recruiters not doing for business development is closing for commitment to the next hire. If you want to become a superstar business developer, you've got to develop the skill where when you go and see a prospect, at the end of that meeting, they put their hand out and they say, yes, I'll call you exclusively the next time I hire. Now, you don't always get it, but there's a sales process that sits around that. So what are your thoughts on that, Alex? Anything to add?
I think that's all good stuff, Mike. And when it comes to, specifically building relationships with prospects, I agree with you. Before investing in building a relationship really with prospects, we want to be qualifying them, or at least in parallel. But what I would say about developing relationships with prospects is listen to them, listen to them. And this is, as we move on, I think this, again, will be something that we talk more about in this call. Most recruiters will, they know that asking questions is kind of a big deal in recruitment. Yeah. But and there's a lot of trainings around questions and asking open questions and closed questions, etc. But there is, there seems to be, less of a capability for really listening. And I think this is one of the things that really differentiates superstar recruiters from mediocre recruiters is, curiosity and really listening with attention to detail. Yeah, because people like being listened to. That's not the way conversations typically unfold in today's world. Yeah, 2 people talking and, one of them is, they're not talking, they're not really listening, they're nodding, but they're waiting for their opportunity to, to share from their side. When you sit in dialogue with somebody who really listens to you and you can feel that they're present in the conversation, they're listening to you, they're expressing an interest and asking you to tell them more from genuine curiosity and an appetite to really understand that person, their views, their experience, whatever it is that you're talking about, then, this is a really powerful relationship builder. It's the foundation of relationship, right? Communication, listening, and it's also a powerful sales tool.
Love that. And I've said for years that the hidden secret of selling is questioning. Now, questioning leads to then listening, obviously. But who knows the best questions? I'll give you an example, because another thing I did to build my desk was senior candidate tracking. The senior candidate tracking is under everyone's nose. People talk about new business. It's under your nose every single day, because if you interview a managerial level candidate, you should be qualifying how often they hire and then nurturing that relationship. And the key question to ask is, John, one of the key things that employers value in people at your level is the ability to build teams. Could you please tell me about the teams you've built over the years and how you went about doing it? So I've created video learning material that delves into this and shows people how to then take the conversation forward, how to deal with the candidate even if you can't place them. But that's a question that is not commonly trained, and it's not difficult. So, after watching this live stream, you could talk to a manager who you're interviewing, and straight away you're seeing them as a hiring manager that could be a client of yours. And there's a skill and there's empathy that sits around that, obviously. I taught that to an IT recruiter in St Albans, and he was billing £300,000 a year at the time. And he subsequently moved on to bill 1.8 million. He's one of the biggest billers in the world. And he told me the majority of his business came from senior candidate tracking, which is astonishing. One question with a strategy to then follow up on it. And we've got Bernardus is asking, how do you create a list of suspects? Bernardus, that document I showed on the screen, TSI, can give you a list of suspects every day, because you're asking every candidate who they're reported to. And some candidates push back on that. Look, we're in sales, guys. It's about objection handling. It's still possible to get names of people if you do it in an empathetic way and skillfully. But these become a list of suspects that you can call. And another one, Bernardus, is the one I just described. Senior candidates who you're interviewing, there could be your clients straight away. Now we've got a question, Alex. I don't know if I can pass this one to you. Anton is asking how to navigate around a hiring manager pushing you to HR. Any tips on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Anton. I'm sure you're probably asking also, maybe without knowing, on behalf of half of the audience on this call or the whole audience as well, because this has got to be one of the most common scenarios that we're facing in recruitment. And the approach can vary from market to market, situation to situation, contract perm, right? But I think that underneath this, is the paradigm that you want to be talking to the people who directly have the needs, the hiring managers. Now, when you're pitching them, you're getting redirected to HR. This happens a lot, and it might be because the manager just can't be bothered and doesn't have time, and you're the 10th recruiter to call them this week. Or it might be because they're one of the few companies that really rigidly enforces those rules with no exceptions. These big global enterprises with inflexible purchasing rules and stuff. But I think ultimately, for me, in that situation, what I want to do is to just get past that. I don't want to debate them on whether or not I should follow HR, whether or not that works. Well, do you find that is successful? Because we find that, if you don't work directly with your recruiters and you go via HR, you don't want to get into an argument with them, and you don't really want to talk about that. So I would just try and distract them by asking something interesting and getting them talking, right? My number one goal in a sales call is generally to get the prospect talking, so that there's some sort of a dialogue going on, a rapport being built. And very many times the call will start with somebody fobbing you off and telling you to go to HR, and you might then have a 20-25 minute long conversation with them where you get to understand all about their team, their organization, their pains, their staffing strategy. And it is also possible that at the end of that, they say, you still do need to talk to HR, right? But they also might not. But in any case, you're learning about the territory, right? Because like Mike said, when we're doing new business, we want to be always qualifying. We don't just want to aggressively force ourselves into every door that is visible. We want to actually do some recon, and as we go knocking on the doors and saying, will you let me in? And also, what does it look like inside? And how much business is there for me, right? And very often you'll find that you can create a conversation like that with, without going straight for the jugular. You call them and you only want to talk about jobs, recruitment. Can I be your vendor? It's a very short conversation. It's no, 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 no. But if you call them and you start saying, I'm a recruiter, and they say, talk to HR, But then you say, great, I totally understand. You know, that's how it's been with my other clients. I will do that. By the way, I noticed that you are overseeing this area, you know, data analytics, for example, and other customers I've been talking to of a similar size to yours in the same industry, they are finding this situation right now with XYZ vendor or product, something, you know, that's relevant, right? Some common ground for you guys. If it's an interesting question, they may well start talking about it. And the conversation about the technology can lead to the conversation about the technology in their business, which leads to a conversation about his team, right? So, you know, the long story short answer to that is I think that you want to just distract away from that objection by having some common ground, something interesting to talk about, and most importantly, to ask them intelligent questions will get you out of a lot of fob off situations because you'll get the client engaged in dialogue. And now they want to talk to you. You're not just some annoying guy who's trying to sell them another thing.
Great advice. I mean, my take on that would be treat it as a lie. So I was out with one of my best clients, Phil, and I'm having a beer with him after work. And I said, Phil, how many calls do you get from recruiters? He said, oh, I get many, Mike. I said, what do they typically want? He said, oh, they want to meet me. I said, okay, and how do you deal with that? He said, I tell them it all goes through HR. I said, right, and what happens next? He said, well, they ask me for the name of the person in HR and they go away. So I said to him, Phil, do you want another beer? I said, I'm still getting all the business exclusively from you, aren't I? And I smiled at him. I overcame his objection. Guys, it's an objection to be overcome. As Alex said, sometimes it's rock solid and you do have to go through HR, and that's the quandary. But always treat it as a lie. So for me, you know, I'm trying to arrange meetings with these people, and I'm pitching it that I can help them save time and money in their hiring strategy, and I can help them position their business more attractively as an employer of choice so that the best talent wants to work for them rather than a competitor. Those are quite compelling reasons to want to meet with me, as opposed to, can I come down and have a chat about your recruitment? Do you have any vacancies? So I would often manage to secure a meeting, and sometimes they're in a bar after work. And by the way, don't get drunk if you do this. You know, I've made that mistake. You know, have one drink or none. You know, have a soft drink. Let the client have a couple of drinks. Or you meet them for a coffee before work, or you meet them for a sandwich at lunchtime. And you're examining where it goes wrong. You see, if you can help the manager to take away problems, you identify costs and time savings. So let me give you a tangible example. It might be that when I'm establishing a need in the call, I say, so John, typically out of every, say, 10 people that you interview, how many of them are not right for your needs? Really, 7 out of 10. I'm sorry to hear that. That sounds a bit on the high side, if you don't mind me saying. And now that we're chatting about it, what are the typical reasons why they're not right? Personality fit, skills don't match, recruiter exaggerated the CV, and so on and so on. I might get 4 or 5 problems from one question. And then I'm able to say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. By the way, what have your current suppliers done what have they advised you to reduce the risk of those problems happening in your hiring process? They haven't done that. Do you know, in our business, this is what we do to reduce the risk of that happening. Why don't we meet and I'll share some cost and time saving initiatives that might help you to improve and refine your recruitment process. It might be something like that. So and if they push me away at that stage, I'm going to try and get HR on the same meeting. So I might say, okay, well, thank you for your interest. I will contact HR. By the way, if HR are interested in meeting, would you want to be on the same meeting? Yes. So now when I call HR, I've been talking to Johnny in XYZ department. Your name cropped up in conversation. He recommended I contacted you. He told me that everything goes correctly through HR. I didn't realize that at the time. But he mentioned that if you want to meet me, he'd like to be in on the same meeting. Wondered if you're free next week. And so sometimes I arrange co-meetings and then gradually took over. So there's many different ways to do it. We've got another question that came in about building relationships with prospects. Now, Alex and I are talking about, physical relationships, not physical, but, verbal relationships, meetings is what I meant to say, meetings. And talking to people, getting to know them, proper relationships. But you can build kind of virtual trust nowadays through social selling. And I'm still shocked how many recruiters are not doing it. So if you want to, if you think of knowing, liking, and trusting, well, if I post and my prospect clients see my post and they like it, at one level, they know who I am. If they then like my post, well, they know and they like what I'm doing. And the trust element can come from more posts and then engagement and contacting people. So it does fit in today's world. And I created a course of 12 videos on social selling, how to create inbound candidates and inbound clients from LinkedIn. It's actually much easier than you think. And you don't need to be Shakespeare to do it. They're really, really simple shortcuts. So let's move on. So if any more questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, guys. And by the way, Alex and I are giving away totally for free to anybody in this session. We'll put a link in the chat. Free access for 1 week to 820 recruiter and manager videos from recruitmenttraining.com. All you have to do is go to that website, sign up, and you get free access, and there's no obligation. So Alex, KPIs, yeah? So do you have any tips on the importance of KPIs for business development?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, right? That comes up from time to time. Personally, I think KPIs are really important. Whatever you want to call them, KPIs, it's about knowing what activity is going to make you money and then paying attention to how much of that activity you're doing and how well the results are coming in, right? So that you can fine tune and improve, and so that you're aware of where you stand, right, against where you want to be going. So I know we've had some conversations about this, and I think that you've got some valuable stuff to contribute. But from my side, it's really just I think that in some conversations that I see on LinkedIn, for example, primarily on LinkedIn, actually, yeah, in this new wave era, I see a lot of people talking about that giving KPIs a bad rep, and we're an environment with no KPIs, and I haven't. Actually, tell a lie. I have worked in an environment like that as trying to be a developing recruiter, and I wouldn't want to do it again, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who's serious about establishing winning habits, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. You're establishing winning habits, and over time, they will pay dividends. But if you're not measuring what you're doing, then you're not taking it seriously, I would say.
Yeah, I think KPIs get a bad rap. I've actually seen adverts from business owners saying we don't have a KPI culture. And, as someone who's built businesses to over 100 staff, I'm thinking, hold on, if you don't measure things, how can you change them? How can you improve them? So you do have to measure things as a manager or a director. The problem is a lot of people measure the wrong things. So I'll give you an example. Senior candidate tracking. Senior candidate tracking will take you to new business if you do it. If you don't do it, you've got less chance of going to new business. It's one of the easiest ways to develop new business. Another one is verbal referencing. So somebody asked in the chat about tangible, examples or stories of how you won business. Let me tell you how I got into Merrill Lynch. Ring, ring, John Mosley speaking. Hello, John, it's Mike Walmsley from X. I'm calling to ask for your help in connection with Martin Davis. Oh, yeah, Martin, I remember him, blah, blah, blah. So I took a reference to get into the conversation. I then, at the end of that, managed to close John for a meeting, say a week later. And I did what most people don't do. I went back for more. And I said, John, looking forward to seeing you next week at 4:30. By the way, when I'm down to see you, who else is also worthwhile meeting? Try Shaheen Sakrani, Mike. Oh, thank you. What does he do? He does blah, blah. Oh, thank you, John. Who else? Peter Kelk. Thank you. And what does he do? Who else? Andrew Burke. Who else? Steve Reeves. Who else? So I call this the snowball effect. So I then rang those people. Steve, Mike Walmsley, I'm coming down to see John Mosley next week. Your name cropped up in conversation. Peter, I'm coming down to see Steve Reeves and John next week. Your name cropped up in conversation. I got 5 meetings in one company on the same day. Very, very efficient. I then said, I rang the guys after I'd filled my first job, and I said, there's a pub outside your offices, the Rack and Tenter on Ropemaker Street. Do you go there? They said, yeah, we're in regularly. I said, I want to buy you all a drink. I want to really get to know your business, invest my time to understand it really in depth. Great, good idea, Mike. So the beers are on me. By the way, who else would you like to bring along with you? So eventually we had the whole pub cordoned off once a month, and we spent about £1,000 a month with about 20 hiring managers back then. They spent £2 million a year, you know. So that's one. Another little story I'd like to share, because this is again under your noses. Okay, so let me show you something so you can get some value after the call. But I'm just gonna take you to let me say here. Okay, so these are some courses that you have within recruitmenttrain.com. Okay, but you can get those for free, all of them, all 820, by the way. So that's not what I wanted to show you. What I wanted to show you is this particular little video, which is here. You can watch it later. I'm not going to show you all of it now. But this is opportunism of big. See a little bit.
I'm not seeing the video yet. I'm just seeing
You can't see that. Okay. No. All right. So can you see my screen where it says free recruitment training?
I can see the overview, the list of videos.
Okay.
All right. The titles of videos.
Let me just share the tab. Is that it?
I see this. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm not pitching this, by the way, guys. I just want you to take the time to watch it. These are real reenacted conversations. Okay. So this particular one, you're going to see a conversation with a candidate and a recruiter. And then you'll see a different scenario. Now, this is actually me. This particular one was me. And I want to tell you the story because someone was asking me about, stories or anecdotes about how you got into new businesses. So you can watch this video at your leisure, and there are many of them. And they're micro training for experienced recruiters. So you see a recruiter talking to a candidate. The candidate says, thanks very much, I've found my own job. The recruiter says, I hope you were happy with the service, and they disappear. In this scenario, this is what happened. Congratulations, Martin, where are you going to be working? Data stream. Right, okay. And how many staff are you going to have? About 12, Mike. Right, and Martin, I remember when we first chatted, you said you want to have top quality people around you. Have you met the people? Yes, I have. What do you think of the caliber of them? Oh, there's a few of them going to have to go. Really? There's quite a bit of deadwood. Right. How many do you think will have to go, Martin? 6. I picked up 6 vacancies on the call. I got a meeting with him the next day. And then I said to him, Martin, have you resigned from your old job yet? He said, I have. I'm working my notice. Have they filled the role yet? No. Then I picked up the job and backfilled the job. Then I went down to see him and I signed up on the second meeting, exclusivity on the whole of his department for the next year. Now, that's from one candidate conversation, which recruiters are having every day. They're talking to candidates. Most business for me comes from candidates. I don't mean interview leads. I mean little things like this. Okay, I'm all over interview leads as well, but I'm saying it's not limited to interview leads. So if a candidate finds their own job, do what Alex suggested, which is be curious and ask questions. Take that conversation a little bit deeper, and you will get massive value from that. So I hope that helps with. I think that was Mark asking the question there.
Yeah, that was Mark Burgess, who is himself, by the way, a legendary biller in the same market as me. He worked for K2 and I was at Red, so we were, competitive. Hey, cool.
Right. Well, Mark, if we're not already connected, please connect with me. I'd love to have a chat with you at some point. So let's move on to the next question. Alex, what do you think about billing from home? Do you think recruiters can bill millions working from home?
I see somebody just asked about this also on LinkedIn just before you raised the question. And this is one of those topics that on LinkedIn I'm almost sick of seeing the things come up. your question, can you bill millions from home? So short answer, yes. Yeah, you can. It is possible. I know somebody who, a total, exception to the rule though. This individual built a million, probably 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 million euro contract desk in a couple of years. And they were fully remote, more or less, bar the odd day every couple of months, after the first 6 months. Now, that person is an exception to the rule. Yeah. I know other people who continue to bill well working remotely, but coming in from the very beginning and working remotely like this person is asking about, people going hybrid or work from home from the beginning, I think that I don't think that for 99% of people, I don't think it's in your best interests. I think that learning through osmosis is extremely important. Recruitment, when you're doing recruitment, you're playing this game where hundreds of different scenarios can occur, but a lot of the same and similar scenarios do come up with your candidates, with your clients, right? And being in an office surrounded by people who are doing the same thing as you means that every time one of these scenarios pops up and there's a conversation about how to do it and you see what the outcome was, you're learning tremendously valuable stuff there at a much quicker rate than if you're only focusing on your own business, let alone the feedback that you'll get from people around you on your own business, your own calls, and the power of being able to see people that you aspire towards. Yeah, the big billers, listening to how they're doing it. I could go on and on and on and on, but suffice to say that I think that it's an extremely powerful catalyst. Yeah, being present around your team for at least a lot of the time is an extremely powerful catalyst for development. And if people want to go hybrid or even remote after they have already really, really mastered their craft, yeah, then good for them. And obviously people can do whatever they want. But I do think that that you're not setting yourself up in the best way for success if you are working fully remote or heavily remote from an earlier phase in your career. That's just my perspective on it.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's madness for young people to say I want to work from home when you've not even done your apprenticeship. So I mean, you talked about, you build millions, but you say it took you 3, 4, 5 years to get there. So there's a big learning curve there. And for me, I was top performer, but I learned from junior colleagues, little turns of phrase that you wouldn't pick up. One of my proteges, he closed a deal once, and I'd never used this little technique, but I cracked up laughing afterwards because it's fun. He's trying something new, and I thought, how did you do that? So he rings the client one day to get a verbal interview, which, by the way, is another big tip of top performers. They get the client to see the candidate they recommend, not just sending a CV and crossing their fingers and hoping that the client chooses their best candidate. They're actually influencing the client to see the people that they've already chosen specifically for the client. So my friend rings this prospect, whose name's Ashok. He said, Ashok, have you got your checkbook handy? In the days when people had checkbooks, I suppose they're still around a little bit. And he said, well, why should I get my checkbook out? He said, well, could you please make the check out for £12,500 to our recruitment company? He said, well, why on earth would I do that? He said, well, that's the fee that unfortunately you're going to have to pay me, but I've got the candidate for you. I'm so confident. And the client laughed, cracked up laughing. And of course, he got the verbal interview. Now, that's creative. Now, you're not going to use that in all instances, and you've got to have the kind of personality to be able to deliver that. But my point is, even as a top performer, I'm learning off other people. I'm hearing little things that they do. And that's me. I was right at the top of my game, but I'm still improving. How can a rookie improve when they don't even know a lot of this stuff? How do they get feedback? So you're quite right. Everyone's got a choice. You can do as you wish. But, I would say do your apprenticeship properly and really master your trade. So Alex, in terms of the billing for this session, we talked about the clash. We're not really clashed yet. Okay. So you were more big accounts. Can you talk about the big accounts? Because I was more spot business. I'd go in, I'd find, 5 or 6 hires in a company, and I'd stay very close to them and nurture those relationships. And I did have some bigger accounts, as I mentioned, but I think you were predominantly on the bigger client side. Is that correct?
Yes.
How did you swarm all over those clients? What did you do to take them from nothing to multi-millions?
Swarm all over them. Yeah, I would say I did often. I actually, the way you use that phrase, there was a time when I swarmed all over a client a little bit too much, and it all blew back in my face. I'll talk about that in a minute. But firstly, I was given some sage wisdom in one of my interviews at Red, the company that I joined after I also nearly left the industry, by the way, after 2 years and 3 employers, feeling pretty miserable. I wasn't going to come back in, but I did. And, into this company, Red. And one of my early mentors, Adrian Carboni, he said to me in the interview, I was asking him questions like this, he said to me, these big enterprises that are running SAP, which was the market that I was operating in, they don't have the option to just turn the lights off on their SAP investment, right? That's not the way it works. So you've got to identify the right doors, keep knocking on them for long enough, and some of them are going to open. And that was sage wisdom, that really that I came back to time after time after time as I struggled through those early years. And, there were times where I didn't believe in that anymore. But essentially, and I'm also going to quote Mark, who asked that question earlier. He said in one of his posts that, recruitment is about timing. I think, yes, contract recruitment is a lot about timing. It's about putting yourself in the right place at the right time. And, and the rest of the game is gathering intel that enables you to do that. And I would add that you need to also be the right partner in the right place at the right time. So you've got to demonstrate your obsession with quality to everybody that you're speaking to. But now to put this into like a kind of a practical approach for cracking into big accounts and developing big accounts, it's really first about identifying them, and this sounds incredibly basic, but most recruiters don't have a really clearly defined set of measurable criteria that define what an attractive account is. Your sheet earlier on alluded to one obvious point, like how many contractors do they hire? That's one of the most fundamental sort of measurements. What's their contractor hiring history? What projects or programs are running or coming up, which might drive contract hiring activity. Senior changes in the leadership team in tech, in IT, for example, that could lead to, you got to think about this stuff and have set criteria of what makes an account attractive for you. So that as you're going across the market and speaking to thousands of people each year, you're not only going job yes, no, job yes, no, job yes, no, will you call me back? Thank you. But you're also getting the lay of the land, and you're mapping out the market, and you're understanding where are the huge antelope accounts, where are the medium-sized accounts that I might get into quicker, where are the spot ones, and you're able to invest your effort accordingly, right? And so again, I think that you'll find that a lot of recruiters talk like, of course I am looking at the big picture, but most recruiters don't have a real big picture strategy for business development, and they're not really working accounts. They are working leads and they're working managers, but they're more transactional conversations, and there's not a great deal of qualification and mapping going on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. There's this talk about research, and we can all go on Google and research it and spend hours on there. Or you can talk to a candidate for 5 minutes and get a nugget off them that takes you directly to where you need to go. That's the key. That's the secret. Get information from candidates, build relationships with them, ask the questions that other recruiters don't ask. Find out about new projects that are kicking off. You know, not just interview leads. And by the way, there are some bad ways to ask for interview leads and some very effective ways. In today's world, if you're asking for an interview lead, a candidate will often say, I've been told not to say by the other recruitment company. But you can still get the information if you approach it in a slightly different way. So it's like any, you know, with effective questioning is the key, and getting information is absolutely gold. You know, I was at an event in Sydney, and there was about 100 recruiters in the audience. I was presenting for the RTSA, the Recruitment Trade Association there. And this guy came up to me at the end, and he gave me a backhanded compliment. And he said, you know, I love your session, Mike. He said, I realise what you do now. I said, what's that? He said, you professionally pick people's pockets without them realising you do now. And when he said it, I didn't like it at first. I thought, oh, that sounds a bit underhanded. But actually, it's true. Professionally is the key word. So I'm extracting information with consummate professionalism, never upsetting anyone. It's always, I find a sensitive way to ask the question that doesn't upset someone, that's value added. That's a skill, and you can develop that skill. And, you know, one of the reasons we've created the reality recruitment videos, you know, which are real reenacted conversations with candidates and clients, is so that you can see the subtlety of how you ask questions and how you extract information, but you don't upset people. So I think that's, you know, for me, very important. Next question, please, Alex, is what's the key thing you see business developers not doing? What do you say? What's the biggest thing they're not doing?
Yeah, so I'll make reference to two things that I've already said, I think, in this one. And I spend a lot of time sitting down with business developers. As you know, most of what I do is one-on-one coaching. So I work very closely with a lot of recruiters doing a lot of BD. And the first thing I'd say is I don't, you know, the main thing I see BD business developers not doing is taking a big picture view and having a clearly defined strategy and consistently executing against it. And that starts with having your, you know, your ICP, yeah, ideal client profile, the criteria that define what an interesting, attractive prospect is for you. Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, it goes deeper from that. But, you know, a next step would also be having a systematic approach to developing the accounts that you have identified as attractive. Right. And, you know, the second thing that I would say that I don't see happening enough is listening, the active listening. People ask questions and recruiters ask questions in business development as well, because you have to appreciate that in business development, it's not the same as qualifying a candidate. You are in the race. Everything's rushing past you. You've got them on the phone, and the minutes, you know, you're, wow, where do I go? So you're very nervous, I guess. Not always, but you're in this rush, right? And so what tends to happen is that you don't always think totally logically. You don't always achieve everything that you wanted to achieve in a sales call, right? And when you ask a question and the client starts talking, you might already be thinking, where am I going to go next with this, right? But very often, you know, where you want to go next with that is listening really carefully to what the client is saying, and then unpacking it and asking them to tell you a little bit more about it, right? And in many cases, that's going to lead you to some golden nuggets for your business development. And in the very least, it's going to build some good rapport with the client, going to get them talking more, show them that you're listening and that you're engaged and that you can listen, right? This is really important. And then the third thing, which is very well tied into that, is I don't see, you know, we mentioned this earlier, separating the superstars from the mediocre performances, is really having and demonstrating an obsession with quality, right? And so this comes down to detail, you know, show that client through your questions and through your shares with them that you are really obsessing about understanding everything in detail, and that you're going to go the extra mile above and beyond, right? And I'll share a short anecdote as well, which is an answer to Mark's question earlier about accounts that you've opened that you're proud of. So this one is about Red Bull. About how many years ago now? A good 12 years ago, probably. I cold called the CIO of Red Bull. Didn't know he was a CIO. He was wrongly tagged on our database, so I thought that he was a manager. And he said, "Oh, you say red commerce, I hear red alert. Your company has been calling my company for 10 years and you've failed to do any business with us. Give up, take us off the database, stop calling," right? And this caught me a little bit off guard, but I got very curious, yeah, and I said, whoa, okay, thank you for sharing that really useful feedback. That's not how we want to be perceived in the market at all. You know, what can I do just to get the opportunity to be considered by you as a potential partner? And he said, "Stop calling." And I said, okay, we will stop calling. Nobody from my company will call anybody in Red Bull again, except for me calling you at a scheduled time in 3 months. And he said, 6 months. And I said, okay, 6 months, fine. So I got off that call. I told my boss what had happened, and he gave me this idea, so I shan't take all the credit for it. But basically, I contacted our telco provider, and I said, guys, I want you to run a report and show me the data of the number of phone calls that have been made from our business into any of the Red Bull phone numbers, the switchboard, the mobiles, etc. And they ran the report. They sent the data back over the past few years, as far back as it went. And then I sent this email to the CIO and I said, look, I want you to know that we took your feedback very seriously. We've run this report. These are the numbers. This is how many calls have been made in to your business. And for sure, that's too aggressive and it's not the way that we want to be perceived. And we're going to change it. There's red tape on the database. Nobody can call you. That, and after that 6 months elapsed. His PA scheduled a call for us, and then he just sponsored me top down into his managers. And some of them worked with me, and some of them didn't. But it turned into a good account. And that was demonstrating, a real obsession with quality, with providing the right service. I listened, took him seriously. And I'm proud of that one, Mark. So love the question.
Yeah, and great story. I love the word obsession. I mean, part of the reason I asked the question again about what business developers are not doing is it was prompted by one of your comments earlier about, the long term, staying in touch and developing and doing it again and again and again. I listen to call recordings. The reality recruitment videos that we've created, quite a few of them are based on real conversations between a recruiter and a client or prospect, and a recruiter and a candidate. And then we reenact those conversations and turn them into valuable learning resources. And so I'm listening to what people are doing, and a lot of them they're missing things. There's things that they're just not doing, despite having 7, 8, 9, 10 years experience sometimes. And one of those things is not diarizing. So it's like they give up. They don't accept that the client might have had a bad day and pushed you away, the prospect client. And I've even seen on databases, in I'm sure you've seen this, do not call ever again, usually in capital letters with 25 exclamation marks. Whereas the superstar is thinking, what can I do next? Where's the angle? Can I send a report to them? Something that you did, you sent a report, you did something constructive and positive. So I think you've got to be a top business developer, you've got to be a dog after a bone. You've got to be, get your teeth into it. And, when some people got rid of me, here's the way I used to think. So, right, look, Mike, we're not interested, blah, blah, blah. And my mentality, I didn't actually say this, but in my head it's, you're not getting away with that with Mike Walmsley. I'll be back. I'm going to get you now. I made it a personal mission to turn it around. It wasn't a case of, oh, they didn't like me or they pushed me away or they don't like my company. It was, you're not getting away with that. We're good. We're good at what you just don't realize. So I think part of being a great business developer is attitude. And if you really believe that you offer the best service, show that with passion. not just sales ability, but have the passion in your voice to convey that you can take their problems away.
100%, like you took a powerful stand for yourself in that situation, and that is, that speaks volumes. I love that. 100%.
Thank you. So we've got a question coming in here. Do you have a different approach to end clients and consultancies? I've got my own view on that, Alex, but what's your thinking on that?
A little bit of banter going back and forth between Gulshan and Maciek there. Maciek, my first piece of advice would be don't listen to anything that Gulshan says. Terrible advice. I'm just kidding. But no, okay. So there is I have a different set of questions that I would ask to consultancy managers, compared to end user managers. I think high level, the formula is the same, right? I'm going to approach them. I'm going to map out who all the possible buying contacts and buying divisions of the business are. What does, what sort of opportunities are there in terms of hiring habits, projects, pain points, etc. I do think that there is a different, it's a different type of customer. So, for example, I would always have a split in my desk of consultancies and end users. And I tended to find that with end users, I could have more control, more reliability, often higher margins, and just a better quality of business. Often, not always. Whereas with the consultancies, I'm also dealing a lot of the time with very commercially savvy, people who also want to maximize their margins. And often it would be less control, less quality, lower margins, but quicker business, So I think that whilst my approach might not change hugely from company to company, other than some of the nature of some of the questions, I think that based on somebody's approach, they might have more success with consultancies than end users, because you can get away with a more transactional approach to, pitching consultancies as a generalization.
Yeah, I think consultancies are often a bit harder to recruit for because they need to make a margin on the candidate when they place them themselves. And therefore they want to penny pinch on the money, and in Europe, I've seen stories where the candidate is lost for the sake of, 50 euros a day salary, and they won't go any further than that. So the key difference for me is you've got to educate the client to sell to candidates. So my last involvement with a consultancy was probably 18 months ago, and I stepped in for a company that I'd invested in because there was no one available to do a meeting with the head of a practice. So I ran the meeting, and the meeting was about how to sell to candidates when headhunting so that they want to work for that company and do great work for them rather than doing great work for one of their competitors. I was on the call on Teams for 30 minutes with him. Only one objective: give me the antidote. Give me the antidote to their current problem. So if in their current environment, they don't get much learning and development, what learning and development do you give? Give me the detail. If their current environment where I'm headhunting them from, they've got terrible management, tell me about the management and how good it is and give me some examples. So, asking really simple questions, which, by the way, are not commonly asked. Things like this: could you tell me about people you've hired that have gone on to great things? How many recruiters ask a question like that when taking a job brief from a client? Not many. It's a great question, because instead of saying to the headhunted candidate, I've got a great company, they've got great prospects, and the candidate's thinking, yeah, the last time I heard that, I went for an interview and it was a 3-man band above a fish and chip shop and it wasn't true, but I'm able to say, John, you say you're really ambitious. I've just been talking to a client of mine, and I asked the manager about people that have been promoted, and he said that in the last year he's hired 15 people, and 5 of them have gone on to next step very quickly within 6 months. One of them is heading up the Singapore office, one of them is heading up Berlin, blah, blah, blah. Does that sound like the kind of career opportunity for you? Now, so I think selling the opportunity is absolutely critical in consultancies, because they struggle because of the penny pinching on the money. And by the way, just as an interest point, this is only 18 months ago. So I recorded it on Teams, and I said, with your permission, we'll put this into our learning management system. So that, the 4 delivery people who are looking after your account, they get it straight from you, and therefore there's no dilution. We'll make sure they watch it. We'll make sure that they're held accountable for understanding that. Therefore, they'll be able to headhunt candidates better than the competitors. And of course, if someone new joins the team, that we've got that training resource. You know what he said to me? He said, "Why does no one else do this, Mike?" I'm thinking, well, there might be a few people doing it now after this call, or maybe some of you are already doing it. But so I think if that helps in terms of the question there, different approach to end clients and consultancies. I hope that gives you at least something to take away and use. So Alex, we've been going for about an hour now. We could obviously talk for a year about recruitment, I'm sure. So it'd be great to get on another call with you. But do you have any other final words of wisdom before we wrap up the call today?
No, look, I think that there's been some great stuff here from both sides, if I do say so myself. But I think there's been some practical tips here, like some of the questions that you've shared. For example, earlier in the call, using the question of what team size do you like to work in as a bridge to understanding, what the team size and the external footprint was like in previous companies. And again, with your, senior candidate tracking, the question that you used there to open, I think that there's some really practical nuggets here for people to take away. If they've taken notes, or I think you can probably watch the recording. And ultimately, from my side, that's it. Have a plan. Yeah. Zoom out, because often you don't see the forest for the trees. Yeah. You slowly dig yourself into an autopilot monotony over the months. Yeah. And that will eventually kill you. If you don't pull your head out of the weeds every now and then, take a look at the forest, reevaluate what you're doing, look at how effectively it's working, get help from your mentors, listen to them, and keep going. Because the number one cause of failure in this game is giving up, and you wait for everyone else to give up, and then you'll succeed anyway.
Yeah, just believe in yourself. And I think you made an important point. Learn every day. I used to go home in London on the tube, and I'd replay a call in my head every night. One word, typically where I'd failed. So I'm holding on to that wobbly thing on the tube. And because you can't get a seat, and I've got my music on. The candidate said X, I said Y. The candidate said, that's it. That's why I didn't get it. Now, that's not difficult to do, but I did it every day. Just one replayed call, remembering what it was, and then trying to refine and find an improvement. So I just want to leave everybody with this. So I presume you can all see my screen now. It says improve recruitment training, attract the best recruiters. Can you see that, Alex?
I see boost, billing, yeah, I see it.
Okay. So, it's recruitmenttraining.com. It's free. There's no obligation. You don't need a credit card. 820 recruiter and manager videos. And just click here, give me the free training, and you're in. So, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today.
Likewise, thank you.
Sharing your insight. I'd love to have another session with you at some point.
Absolutely.
Other than that, guys, I'll leave the rest of you to carry on billing and have a great rest of the day.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.